Welcome back, David.
Thank you, Yorda. It's nice to be with you.
David, I imagine the My Lai Massacre was a deeply traumatic experience for the Vietnamese people. Why do you think they made a film about it?
Just to remind the Vietnamese, the young new generation of Vietnamese, of what happened back nearly 43 years ago. So they just want to remind them, or the film director, to remind the Vietnamese of what happened then, and also to remind the world. It was handled with extreme care. It was handled in a very dedicated way to try to get it accurate as best they could. Remember, it was 43 years ago. They got people off the streets to act in the movie. They got some of the survivors from the massacre to get it right, to get the actual historic parts of what happened right in the movie.
Get out! In the tunnel!
How have the people of Vietnam reacted to this film?
I watched it with the film director, Lee Dan, at his home, and he had about 10, 15 people sitting with me as he was showing it. Afterwards, a lot of these young people particularly were very moved, and they were saying it's right that he's made this film. They felt very proud that he had made this film about a dreadful tragedy.
Your guide took you to the area where the massacre took place. What did you find there?
It's been recreated as a reminder in a very tasteful way of what happened at My Lai with the big massacre there. The remains of the homes are there with the wooden stumps left where they burnt the homes down. Animals made out of clay like cats, dead dogs, things like this. There was an elderly lady, I think she'd be in her 80s, and I asked her could she come down to where her house was, and she was incredibly emotional all these years later.
Nó bán thì mấy chị đó ngã, tôi cũng ngã xuống mấy chị chặn tôi dưới mương, rồi tôi sống lại, rồi nằm miết dưới mương, nó bán lần thứ nhất đây nghỉ chừng 1 phút, rồi nó bán lần thứ nhì, trẻ nhỏ đây còn cửa còn khắp nó ra nó bán hết, bà già con nít, rồi nó bán lần thứ nhì rồi nó nghỉ cũng 1 phút kia nó bán lần thứ ba là coi như ông cha tôi đó còn, rồi nó bán tất cái đầu nó bán.
You could see the pain in her body.
Tôi thì khiêng mấy người chạy với ông cha tôi đó đi châu. Tôi chừng nữa tôi về tôi khiêng với mấy người đó đi lại châu đi ghi ông cha tôi với mấy bà chị với mấy đứa cháu là 6 người.
Some of them have forgiven the Americans. She said she hasn't forgiven them and won't forgive them because it was just too much. Well, you imagine, Yorda, that majority of her family was killed, wiped out for no reason. They weren't Viet Cong. It was a wrong village that the Americans went into. Once they got there, they panicked, lost their cool, and the massacre just started to happen. What's there?
Yes, that's the coconut with bullet holes still inside. Yeah, it's survivor since massacre.
Bullet holes there, eh?
Yeah.
So where are we going now?
Now I would like to take you to some mass grave of the victims.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where we go?
Yeah. Usually, there for female in Vietnam.
Right.
Yeah. And the
62.
age of the victim, 62.
8.
Yes, the age.
5,
Yeah.
34,
In
6,
Vietnam,
1.
B and E, and their age. B and E to show that they were little girl, so young.
Little girls.
Yeah.
And they killed them too.
Yeah, of course.
My guide was showing me around the grave area and the remainder of the houses that's set up there. And she said one American was looking at the graves. Imagine, looking at those tombstones, and he broke down and he kept hitting himself like this, just in frustration. It's pretty heavy stuff when you start hitting yourself like that. And he was so moved, and he just broke into tears of what he was seeing. And I can understand that. You've got to be there and see it, Yilda, to really appreciate that human beings can do what they did there at that time. The museum director told me that a lot of Americans go there. They don't say a lot, they quietly go around, have a look. And he thinks some of the actual soldiers who were involved in the massacre have been there. He could tell that the way they were looking, the way they were so emotional about it, that he believes that some of them have gone back. The museum director was a young survivor. A lot of his family were murdered, killed in the massacre at My Lai.
Và sau đó thì Mỹ đổ quân xuống và kéo vào trong làng, bắt bà con nhân dân trong làng của chúng tôi gom lại từng nhóm, từng tốp để mà giết tập thể. Thì lúc đó là tôi bị thương, nằm dưới đống xác chết của cả gia đình, do đó mà tôi sống sót lại. Nhưng mà khi mà nhắc lại cái chuyện cũ này đó là dường như là bản thân tôi có những cái di chứng và thường hay khi mà được phỏng vấn là về tiếp đó những đêm tiếp theo là không ngủ được và có những cái sợ hãi và dường như là tiếng súng, tiếng kêu, tiếng khóc là nó vang ở trong đầu óc lương tâm của mình.
It started off as a very small museum, then it just grew, and that's what his whole life's about.
There are a number of photographs there. Where did they actually get these photographs
Well,
from?
that's an amazing story. I mean, on that raid, when the Americans came in on their helicopters to raid that village, that was supposedly a Viet Cong village, they had a professional army photographer who was documenting the whole battle. So they were professional photographs taken with professional cameras by a professional photographer. And they were taken back, obviously, to the Pentagon and printed up and put into the files for history, and later they were released. So the Vietnamese got hold of them. I mean, they're beautiful quality 10x8 prints. Lieutenant William Kelly, who took the major responsibility, he was the scapegoat of what happened, because there were other officers further up the rank, up to a colonel, who were equally as responsible, but they used him as the scapegoat.
In the film, Lieutenant William Kelly returns to the village and apologises, but that actually didn't happen. Why do you think they created that scene?
Well, they'd like him to come back. I think they would put a lot of closure to the story, that if he came back and said to them at the village there, "I'm sorry for what I did, I'll never get over it." He has said it, but he won't come back and say it. It was just to show that's what they'd like him to do. But he won't come back. He said this. And if you want to do an interview with him, he charges $50,000 because he's fed up with the whole thing. He just wants to get on, obviously, with his life, or what's left of it.
You have had a long association with Vietnam. What was it like for you to go back and go into this village and hear their stories?
Yilda, it's very sobering to go and see something like this, particularly when you were involved in the war as a television correspondent, because it just brings it all back again. Some of those photographs on the walls that I walked around and had a look at, I was the only one there that day, it makes you realise how could something like this happen that is still happening. But I hope that we do learn by revisiting something like My Lai, because it's humanity at its worst. And you walk away, in my case, and you feel humble, you feel ashamed, but you feel in a way at peace, or you just want to try to be better as a person for that moment.